Resistance, burnout, procrastination, sleepless nights, stress, and painful hard work. Fatigued from running on the high achiever hamster wheel? This is the Bold Leadership Revolution, where we develop high-performing leaders to live, thrive, and lead bold and smart, not hard. Here is your host, Tara Newman.
Hey everyone, we are live here today with the behind the scenes of the Bold Leadership Revolution podcast. And I wanted to really help everybody kind of step through what it looks like to have a big goal in their business and what it looks like to execute on a goal, as well as share with you some of the exciting things that are going on behind the scenes here and tell you a little bit about the podcast and let you decide for yourselves whether or not you're going to tune in when we go live with the podcast at the end of September. So I'm just going to take a minute. I'm going to wait, see if anybody pops on. It's the middle of the day. You can always catch us on the replay. And if you join us, just say, hey, let me know where you're from. Give me a shout and just say hi. Okay. I'm not going to wait too long though, because like you will find out from the podcast, we're not going to be doing fluff. We're not going to be kind of belaboring things. We're going to be getting straight to the point. Oh, I see a couple people here. All right. Just say, hey, if you join us. And so really the things that we're going to cover today on this behind the scenes episode is how I wanted to start a podcast since 2013. And while that might look like procrastination, it actually wasn't. We're going to talk about some of my personal and professional reasons for starting a podcast. Why a podcast? Why now? We're going to talk a little bit about my mission. If you're new to me, if you're not new to me, you'll know what the mission is and some of the key decisions that went into bringing this podcast to life. And now if you see me looking up or down, I have notes and I face a wall and I have all these stickies. It looks like the den of a crazy woman here right now. I've got about 5 giant sticky notes up there, and they are up there to remind me of things like my why. And they're up there to remind me of what we're doing here, why we're doing it, the values that we want to portray through this podcast. The different podcast episodes are laid out up ahead of me, as well as the dates, because I wanted this to be at the forefront of my mind every single day when I showed up to work. It's something that helps keep me focused and keeps me on track. And so let's jump into why I waited so long to start a podcast. And it's funny because as I was emailing people and on my list and sharing with my audience that I was going to be starting a podcast, the standard response was, yay, what's taken you so long? Yay, can't wait for this. Finally. And so yes, finally, because I have wanted to do this since 2013. It has been on my bucket list and I've waited. And it is not procrastination though, because I know a lot of the high achievers that I work with, they worry that they're procrastinating. They're worried that they're taking too long in executing something. And really, this really sunk in for me when I was using Danielle Laporte's planner last year. She had one of these little truth bombs at the bottom. I have it right here. And the truth bomb said, procrastination can be a form of intuition. And when I read that, I was like, yes, this makes so much sense, right? Sometimes we're just not ready to step into something. Sometimes the timing isn't right, or we have further to go in our journey. And I know that certainly was what it was for me, in the sense that I wasn't at a place in my growth back in 2013 or 2014 or 15, or for God's sake, 16. I just wasn't in the place to do this. I wasn't ready to show up in this way. I wasn't ready to wear the hat of a broadcaster or the role of a podcaster. And it wasn't until a few months ago that I trusted my intuition, and I knew that now is the time for me. And it didn't even come about in a way that was so earth-shaking. I was starting to outline a group program, and I was doing some market research for this group program, and I sat down with my team to outline it. And the next week I came back and they said, okay, where are we on the group program? And I said, we're not doing a group program. We're going to start a podcast. And it was just my time. And it was also Danielle Laporte who I think kind of triggered this for me. I was listening to her do an interview, and it was an interview with Melissa Griffin. And she was talking about how her strengths are to be a broadcaster and her mission is to broadcast light, which I love that. But that for her, it's not okay just to reach a few people. She wants to have a larger impact and she wants to reach more people. And for the first time, and listen, people have said that to me. I hear that a lot, right? Like you either, you do this kind of work, you reach this many people. It has a ripple effect. It reaches this many people. But when you do this, it reaches this many people, right? And I was never someone who wanted to reach that many people. I was always happy with the ripple effect of my work until now. Now I am ready to reach a larger audience. I'm ready to take the work that I do on an individual one-on-one level and bring it into the world to have a greater impact. And now it seems like the perfect time to really be helping and guiding leaders all over the world in their development. And that is really the purpose of this podcast. And it's really a deep part of my why. So when I was going in to develop this podcast, I really had to slow down. That's what my intuition was telling me. It was telling me to slow down. And as I slowed down, I realized that there were other things that needed to shift and change in my business in order for me to step into this podcast. And it was a time, the last probably 6 to 8 weeks has been a time of a lot of change and a lot of big decisions for me in my business. I closed down my Facebook group. I'm changing my business name. You'll see this is no longer Tara Newman Coaching. It's now the Bold Leadership Revolution. I'm rebranding. I've had new copy written that will be going up on my website. I'm going through a rebrand right now that will not be complete by the time the podcast launches, but we will launch anyway. And so this has been a time of a lot of change and a lot of decisions that I have had to make in my business. So the reason why now is the time for me to do a podcast. I said that I want to reach a larger audience, but really for me now, it's a couple of things. It's about meeting new and inspiring people, right? Like that's always a goal of mine. It's something I write every day when I write out my goals, that I'm interested in meeting new and inspiring people. And I think podcasting is a great way to do that. It's a great way to open doors for other people. It's a great way to open doors for yourself. And so my primary why is to meet new and interesting people. The second part of my why is, as always, is to develop badass, ballsy, bold leaders in the world and to really serve my community and to offer them the most valuable content that they can consume, right? The most valuable, relevant content. And the reason why a podcast and not some other form of medium is, and the main reason why I closed down my Facebook group is because when I started to do market research on my ideal clients and on my audience, they are all overwhelmingly all audio consumers. They are incredibly busy in a good way, leaders. Some of them don't even go on social media. Some of them don't have social media accounts. They wouldn't know what to do if they entered a Facebook group. Many of them don't have the time to catch a Facebook Live and watch it, but they can listen to it. So that is really why I've chosen podcasts. A disproportionate amount of my clients are athletes as well as entrepreneurs or executives. And so they are running, they're working out at the gym, maybe they're commuting. So audio is just a really easy way for them to consume content. So it's really being in service to the audience that I want to be in service to and offering them valuable content in a way that is easy for them to consume. Another reason why I've chosen a podcast is because I love listening to podcasts myself. There have been many podcasts that I've listened to going way, way back to 2011, 2012 that have had profound impact on my life. There have been a number of them that have either taught me something about myself, taught me something about business, taught me something about sport that I'm, interested in learning more about. It's just a great way and I've met a lot of friends through podcast communities, and it has really been very influential in my life. So that is something that I want to give back as well. Like, I've spent all these years listening to podcasts, and now it's my time to have a podcast and pay it forward. And I think the last reason why I chose to create a podcast is because when I was in corporate and I was responsible for learning and development, we would always look for challenging work assignments, challenging projects to give leaders to help them develop the skills that they needed next. And it wasn't about taking a course, and it wasn't even so much about being coached. It was about really identifying these projects that will help them stretch and grow and challenge themselves. And so this is me taking my own medicine, so to speak, and giving myself a project that is really going to stretch me and challenge me to grow. So this really is for my own personal development as well, because I've never done a podcast. I know almost nothing about podcasting, yet here I am. So this is going to be a really exciting journey for me to take in my own professional development. So those were all my professional and personal reasons for starting the podcast. And, a little bit about the podcast in general is my mission is really simple. It's to develop leaders who can step off the high achiever hamster wheel, as I like to call it, and really step into their power, whether it be their superpowers or their hidden powers that they don't even know exist yet, that they are going to hone and cultivate through their leadership journey. So, that's really the bulk of my mission, as well as to take leaders from a place of frenzy, frustration, and fatigue and move them to a place that is clear focus, calm mind, with clear actions that they can take to move forward in their business or in their career if they're working in somebody else's organization. And I believe that the best way for me to really bring my mission forward is to do it through the podcast, right? To really throw all my eggs into this basket. So like I said, I've made big decisions. I've closed down my Facebook group and really simplifying my business to have the community really focus around the podcast itself. And some of the key decisions that went into creating this podcast. Listen, in today's day and age, right, we can all have a podcast up in one hot minute. It's completely possible. And it's an option for a lot of people. And I'm not saying that the way I'm doing it or I did it is the right way to do it. I will say that the way I did it is the way I did it. This is what felt really good to me. This is what felt like it was really aligned with how I want to show up in the world. The plan that I put together and the decisions that I made came from a place of intuition and not necessarily logic. Some of them might actually even defy logic. Who knows, right? They may defy some, guidebook on how to create and launch a podcast. I don't really know. I haven't really read any of them. I completely came at this from an intuitive perspective. So one of the big decisions that I made was around the timing and the time frame of idea, execution, launch. So I chose a much longer time frame. So as I said, you can launch a podcast in a hot minute. It's really easy to get your hands on the tools that you need, do some light editing, and to get it on its way. And I chose a longer time frame and timing for a reason. One, hey, Susie, you just got to my part where we're talking about the key decisions that I made in creating this podcast. So one was around timing and time frame and the fact that I chose to slow down my execution. So for me, I really chose to slow down because I know that when I slow down, I can speed up. I get to go faster. And I like to think things through and put a lot of intention into it in the beginning. So then I can just move into execute. And my big decisions that needed to be made around branding or anything like that were pretty much made within 24 to 48 hours once I really slowed down and got clear on my vision and my why and my intentions. I also chose to launch this in the fall for a couple of reasons. One, my kids were off from school all summer. This is not a time in my business that I do a lot of things. And so if I was being really intentional about how I was going to spend my time, I chose to spend it on this project. And I said, I have 10 weeks that they are home from school. I'm going to spend these 10 weeks working on the podcast and slow things down, take my time, leave room for more crunch schedule, to leave time for vacation, to leave time for wanting to do things with my children while they were out of school. And then I get to go into the fall, which for me is like the new year. Like the new year isn't even the new year for me. The fall, September for me, that energy in the fall is my new year. And I knew that connecting with that energy and that natural cycle for me was going to be really powerful. And it also led itself really well into the end of the year. So for leaders who are looking to plan out their next year, leaders who are looking to do some development work before the year's up, look for some inspiration and motivation to finish the year strong, I'm here with the podcast to take care of that for them. So those were kind of the reasons why I slowed things down. I took my time. I didn't launch this in a hot minute. It affected, like I mentioned before, it affected a lot of other areas of my business. It affected me going through a rebrand. It affected me having copy written. I chose to, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, I chose to do some branding on the podcast and have things professionally recorded. So I needed some time to outsource that. And so that's really why the time frame slowed down. And I believe that when you execute in a hasty fashion, you get hasty results. And that just because as entrepreneurs, we have a great idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be executed on immediately. It's okay to step back. It's okay to evaluate, to park the idea, to let it percolate, and to really put some intention behind it before executing. It's okay to slow down. The second decision that I want to share that we made was around the format, so to speak, of the podcast. And I chose we're choosing to play with this, and we're choosing to let it evolve over time, and we're allowing it space to be tested and to see what works. That's one thing. Initially, we were going with seasons. So the first season will have 12 episodes. I kind of keep saying, and some bonus episodes, because I like to be chatty and I might have more to say than will fit in 12 episodes. And so there'll be bonus content, but I get to decide that. I chose to do seasons because for me, that feels really sustainable. I like the fact that I get a break. I like the fact that I'm going to give my audience a break. And so if they're coming in mid-season and they haven't listened to the first 4 or 5 episodes, when we take a break, they can go and catch up. They can engage. They can share, and they will not feel like they are being fire hosed with content. So that is the main reason why I chose seasons. And also for me, my brain likes to have things batched and organized. And when I think about it in terms of seasons, I can think about it in terms of themes, in terms of learning objectives, in terms of batching the content itself. The other decision that we made was to build a team and a process behind this. So I don't like working in a vacuum. I don't like creating in a vacuum. So I started to onboard team to help in this project. I have somebody who is a content and creativity expert on my team, Jo Gifford, and she and I work together weekly to do all kinds of things related to content, related to repurposing, related to promoting, related to the creative pieces of this podcast. And so that has been a really amazing experience for me. And it took a couple of weeks to get her on board and to get things going. Also, why I chose a longer time frame, because it's not just me, hastily executing. I have a team with me. We're really sinking into this, and we're making this a really enjoyable experience. We're having so much fun creating this content, as well as Jo will probably be a guest host with me on a few episodes. So I'll have a bunch of episodes that are solo, and I will have a bunch of episodes that are co-hosted. I don't know if Jo will be the permanent co-host. We haven't even thought about that. I know I will have other co-hosts on as well. Maybe even clients of mine will come on and co-host an episode. I think that would be super fun. I'm not intending on doing a lot of interviews. This is conversation and solo episodes, but not interview based as much. We also hired out the podcast branding. So I went to a company, and that's all they do is brand podcasts. They made it really simple. They wrote the script for the intro. They wrote the script for the outro. They suggested the voiceover talent. They boiled down to like 10 songs that fit my brand of podcasts and picked one. And it saved me a ton of time. It saved me a ton of headaches. It saved me a ton of frustrations, and it was well worth it. And I think I had my branding back in a 2-week time period. So, that was another big decision that I made, because having some people on the team here allowed me to delegate, and it allowed me to hand off things that I'm not as great at. Because when I get stuck doing the things that I'm not so good at, like the tech stuff or, fiddling around with audio files, that starts to immediately decrease my confidence across the board, even in the things that I am good at. So that's really, for me, the biggest benefit to outsourcing, to delegating, to bringing on team in situations like this. And they will stay with me because now there's going to be a process. Now we have to have the podcast edited and put through any kind of marketing process. So they will stick with me. So those were like 3 key decisions that I made leading into creating this podcast and through the creation process. I opened it up to questions, and I had 2 questions that were in advance, and I thought that they were really worth sharing. They were great questions. And the first question came from Shoshana Chaim of planttrainers.com. And it's also a podcast. Plant Trainers is a podcast. They talk about improving your health, your wellness, your lifestyle through a plant-based diet. So if you're looking for a good podcast on health and wellness and plant-based eating, you should definitely go check out Shoshana and her husband, Adam, on the Plant Trainers podcast. And Shoshana asked, what's the plan to grow the podcast audience? And I'm going to preface my answers here by saying, I know nothing about podcasting. I am going to leverage my years of experience online. I've had a blog since 2012. I have never podcasted. So I'm going to be leveraging the things that I learned about blogging. I'm going to be leveraging the things I know about business. And I'm going to be leveraging my intuition and my own vision in how I grow my audience organically for the podcast. And so the first thing I want to say is that I will absolutely have metrics on downloads, and those things are important to me, but they're not my primary focus. Our primary focus is to serve leaders, to have unconventional conversations, and to really provide useful and practical tools and resources to people who need them. So, that's really my focus. My focus is not necessarily on the numbers. It never has been, not when I was a blogger, not in all the years that I've had an email list or a Facebook group. It's never for me been about the numbers. It's been about the engagement. Yes, clients on the podcast. Okay. Susie, you'll come on the podcast. So, that's one thing. Starting the podcast for me also is a long-term strategy. I have no intentions that this podcast is going to be some kind of epic blow up. I mean, I'm open to it. That's fabulous. But, in terms of my business, this is a long-term strategy. Yes, you. And so this is really going to be a long-term piece of my strategy. It's going to go through my strategic review process, like every other part of my business, around what's working, what's not working, how can we improve it, what tweaks need to be made. I'm going to be grounding into patience here, which is also going to be a great growth experience for me. Let's see. I'm really influenced by Gary Vee when he says 1 is better than 0, right? So in terms of my podcast growth strategy, 1 is better than 0. So with each new podcast listener that I pick up, with each new engaged listener, there's just going to be a shit ton of gratitude for people who are taking their time to tune into what I have to say and to really be a part of my community. I'm going to keep things fresh. I'm going to mix it up because I don't think that when you do the same thing over and over again, it kind of loses its appeal. I'm going to get my network involved, especially during the launch, asking my network to share with their network. And as specific episodes come up that I know have relevance to somebody in my network, I will definitely share and be bold and ask them to share as well. I'm going to encourage, really for me, and the reason why I went from Tara Newman coaching to the Bold Leadership Revolution is because I don't want this to be the Tara Newman show. I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about bold leaders in the world. And I want this to be about your development and the things that you need to thrive as a leader. And so for me, this is going to be about really encouraging a ton of engagement, a ton of listener questions, spotlighting listeners like I did today, saying, Shoshana, go check her out. And really kind of encouraging that community, because for me as an entrepreneur, like my big why is to create wealth and jobs in the world, right? To be a participating member of the economy. And there's nothing more that I love than to connect people who can do business together, to refer my clients to people. Lots of times people contact me and they say, listen, Tara, I know you're not the coach for me, but I really trust and respect your coaching. Who do you know? Because I'm going to trust your referral. You know, these are the things that I want to come out of this community. I'd like this to be a community where we find people to do business with, where we find people to learn from, where we find friends, and life is a little less lonely because of the Bold Leadership Revolution community. So really encouraging a lot of audience engagement and listener questions. And again, a goal for me is really to go, I think this is being redundant at this point, but to say that whole concept about going deep and not wide, right? Like if I've got a core group of listeners who are really engaging with me, downloading on a regular basis, coming back over to the Facebook page and asking questions and sharing their insights, and, you know, I'm going to have ways for everybody to do this and to participate, you know, then for me, I know I'm doing the right thing. That is my main metric. And so that is really what I have to say. I've gone on for about a half hour. I have a couple other questions that people have asked me. I'm going to cover them on the other lives that we're doing, the other behind the scene lives, because I don't want to keep you too long. I have another call to get onto. And you know, if you listen to this and this has value to you, please share it. Please leave a comment. I'm happy to comment back. And I look really forward to doing this again next week. We're going to dive into this was a lighter episode. We're going to dive into some deeper things, like all the fear and the stories and the behaviors that came up that were potentially going to stand in my way and be my kryptonite to getting this thing launched. And we're going to go into that. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to be really open about how I moved through those things, as well as just giving you more information on how we're going to be rolling this thing out. So leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Bold Leadership Revolution podcast. This episode has ended, but our work continues online. Head over to theboldleadershiprevolution.com, where you'll find links to any resources mentioned in today's episode, along with other valuable tips and information that will help you lead bold. That's theboldleadershiprevolution.com.